Hello, welcome to Pro Tips number 74, where today I'm going to talk a bit about drivers, specifically driver hygiene and what it can tell us about potential risk as well. I have done a pro tip about drivers before, although it was quite some time ago, so that's why I wanted to revisit it and not just go over the basics, because last time I went more over the basics on how you can or where you can find the data and how you can view it, etc. Today I want to dive a little bit more into how you can use your driver information to really get more actionable insights out of it. And with that, I mean indicators that might indicate that there's something misconfigured, there's something wrong, or that might indicate that there's potential risk, maybe malicious drivers that have been installed somewhere within your environment and things like that. So I've created basically 3 reports that kind of look at different data points that we have on drivers. And I'll explain a little bit how you can use those, what those might indicate. And obviously, those drivers will be available for you to use yourself and for you to adjust. And also then in a later stage, put alerts on and things like that so that you can better manage and get alerted when there are drivers in your environment that might indicate that there's something wrong or there's some risk, and it might save you some headaches in the future. That's the goal in the end, to prevent that there's any kind of risk or devices that start failing because there are drivers that have issues, etc., or conflicting drivers and so on. So let's get started with this then. So I'm gonna jump into Lansweeper, where I'm just gonna go over the 3 reports, and one by one I'll explain a bit about them and how you can use them. So starting with going to the reports area, if you just search for driver, you should be able to find them. There's basically 3 of them. So we have the auto/boot system drivers not running, the printer drivers using non-default print processors, and last but not least, system drivers running from unusual paths. So let's start with the auto/boot system drivers not running. Now, this specific reports, all the reports, by the way, will be looking at only data that has been driver information that has been scanned in the last 7 days. So just keep that in mind. That is to mainly make sure that your information, the data that you're looking at, is not too outdated. If that driver information is from a month ago, there's a high likelihood that maybe it has changed already and things like that. So it only shows from the last 7 days. That's important to know. And then basically what I've created here is a report that shows you just a list of all the system drivers that you have, where the start mode is either set to system, boot, or auto. You can see the difference. There's a kind of a collection of them here in the list, and specifically the ones that have that start mode but are not actively running. Now, in a lot of scenarios, there are certain drivers that are designed that way. They run during the boot sequence, they do some checks, and then they stop. There are certain drivers like that, and I'll show you in a second how you can omit those, how you can exclude those, so that you can make this list more actionable. But there are drivers that, in a lot of cases, they start up on boot, or they automatically start up, and they need to keep running. They are critical. One clear example of that is, for example, here we have the WD filter one. If you look at the caption, it'll be a bit more clear what that actually means and what it does. It is a filter driver for Microsoft Defender. Now, unless you are using a different antivirus software and you have purposely disabled that, this is a big red flag. This should not be stopped in any circumstance, really, if you're using Microsoft Defender. It is key to how Windows Defender operates. And it might indicate that maybe, somebody has been able to disable it somehow, and it shouldn't be happening. This should be a red flag, and it is a chance for you to take action on it. Now, looking at all the other ones, maybe some of these we don't really care about, or we've set up on purpose, we've configured ourselves. Then all you need to do is, you'll have to create a duplicate, but then you can edit it as you like, which means that You'll see here some of the logic. This will be set back to 7 days because I did that for this demo purpose, so I could show actually what was going on with the Windows Defender one. But interestingly, if you want to adjust this, if you do see some defaults, some things that are as expected, they're not really risks, you can go here into the bottom step, basically the last step, where I already added a few like WD boot, HW policy, and DAM or DAM. Those are basically drivers that do start up on boot, but they're expected to stop. If there are additional ones that you find within your environment that you don't really care about, all you need to do really is just add a filter value, add the name of that specific driver, and save it, and that will then be excluded from the report. So that way you can easily modify it to make it actionable for you, so that only the things that you care about or the things that you could see as risk are actually in there. So let's save that, and back to the report itself, and then talk a bit more about how you can actually use this. Now, you might have seen in some of the previous pro tips, we've been starting to do pro tips around automations that we have in the product as we are continuing with Flow Builder and the beta phases of that. So we are continuously furthering this feature and developing it more and more. It's not yet available for everyone. But this would be a prime example of where you can use this information in a very simple manner. You could say, hey, as long as, give me daily notifications of when new information pops up in this specific report. You could also, and that's more, I guess, a further step or a more advanced automation would be to take a look, and as soon as something comes in, or basically when this report is executed, take a look at the output of it, the results, and actually then start looking at creating a ticket for that, so that you basically have in your ITSM product, every single day there'll be a check running. Lansweeper will run this automation that will check, are there any drivers that are stopped that shouldn't be stopped? If so, it creates a ticket in your ITSM product with the asset information attached to it. If there are CIs already in your CMDB that is hopefully integrated with Lansweeper, then that CI link can automatically be, or that CI can automatically be added to the ticket as well. So there's a lot of opportunity there to automatically start creating tickets to indicate that there's a risk, to start alerting the right people that they investigate what has been happening and why this driver is not active, is stopped, basically. So moving on, let's take a look at our second report, which is system drivers running from unusual paths. The reason why I've created this report is that your system drivers, most of the time, generally speaking, are really just located in two specific areas, which is, and I have to cheat here for a second, system32/drivers or system32/driver store. Those are the two main directories of where you will find the drivers. Now, if there are drivers that are outside of those directories, doesn't necessarily mean that it is malicious or a big problem, but it might be an indicator that it is. They're not really default locations outside of those two that drivers often get put into. It might indicate that somebody is trying to use a driver that is maybe not approved, that is not in your, let's say, your driver whitelist. It might just simply be misconfiguration, or that whoever created the driver is doing basically some sloppy packaging and is really not really adhering to best practices. So it can be nothing, but in the worst cases, it is something where somebody might be potentially actively trying to get around your allow lists, get around or try to avoid any kind of directories that are usually checked by EDR tools or your security tools. It might be that somebody's trying to do one of these, bring your own vulnerable drivers attacks, where they load, or they basically load in their own drivers that have been modified. something along those lines. In any case, any driver that is not in kind of the default source, you might just want to have a gander at every so often. Again, similar to the previous report, when you edit this, when you duplicate and edit this, at the bottom there is a place here, and at the moment I just throw it in test because there's no real defaults that I've excluded already, but there's kind of test here. Similar to the previous one, you can adjust this, you can add new values to start excluding things to make sure that it's only applicable to things that you've never seen before and that are not default, that you're not aware of already. So really you just have to look at the report once, go through it once, start excluding some things that you're like, yep, I know that, I trust that. For example, this is my home machine, so for one of the things here is de novo anti-cheat for some of the games that I play. That is expected. I'm aware that exists. That is not a risk on its own. So that's something that I could start excluding. Obviously, within a corporate environment, there'll be different things that you might want to start excluding, that you are aware of and that you acknowledge, and that that's fine. We can ignore those. Again, similar to the previous one, and this I think will be a trend throughout all these reports in the future. When you get your hands on Flow Builder, on automations, you can start creating automations with it, creating tickets for the ones that don't make sense, that might indicate risk, or just throw in alerts in either Slack or Teams, so that every time that there's newer entries that you're alerted of, you don't have to manually keep track of this or keep running it and keep remembering to check in on it, basically. The last one that I created is, as you can see at the moment, an empty one, but for good reason. This is a report that looks at printer drivers, and specifically looks at printer drivers that are not using the default print processor. Now, as I head into the configuration here, why is this important? There are legitimate reasons as to why you might not use the default, and let me see here, the default print processor is WinPrint, as it says here as well. That is a default print processor. There are reasons why one would not use that default one. For example, if you have some custom setup where you have some watermarking features enabled or something along those lines that you use, and in order to get that watermarking on everything that you print, you've got a custom print processor setup or something along those lines. Not very frequently used, but there are legitimate reasons as to why you want to do that. Now, where this turns into risk is basically that the moment you start using a custom print processor, it means that your print jobs run through extra code that runs inside of the privileged, they call it, the spool sv.exe service, like the print spooler service thing. And as I mentioned, while this can be legitimate, if this is not legitimate, it is also, it is a way that people can abuse the printing processes to start doing things that you might not want to happen. Things like, for example, it can start intercepting or altering the documents that are being printed. Same as it can, if it can alter the things that are being printed, it can also read what is being printed. So data exfiltration is a risk there. So basically, anytime you see a print processor that is not the default one, it should be, at the very minimum, something you might want to investigate, just to double check that it is supposed to happen like that, and it's supposed to not use the default one. If it, and in the worst case scenarios, it can be an indicator of significant risk. So you definitely want to investigate the thing. Again, similar to the previous one, as I mentioned, third times in a row now, but when it comes to automation and things like that, this is a thing where you want to start create tickets out of it if there are results in this specific report. It is one where you want to be alerted if something like this pops up. And I will have a link if you happen to be part of the beta program for Flow Builder. We've created pro tips in the past where we've kind of shown how to create alerts and things like that. And once Flow Builder is available to everyone, I'm sure I'll follow up on this as well. And there'll be many more pro tips that will cover automations. So that will come in due time as well. But for now, this is kind of where I'll leave things with these 3 reports. You'll be able to find them in the blog version. So if you're watching the video, in the blog version, you'll be able to find the links that will bring you directly to the actual reports. If you're not running in a hybrid scenario, or if you're not running cloud first, there will also be on-prem versions of these reports, so don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. So those will also be available for you to use and customize however you like. But hopefully these 3 reports give you something useful that you can use to better manage some of the drivers in your environment, and more significantly help you with kind of looking at where there might be some potential red flags for risk within your environment, and therefore prevent some headaches, prevent some potential long nights in the future. So with that being said, thank you for watching. Hopefully these reports are helpful for you, and I'll see you in the next one.